right. In the spirit of transparency, we brought you here today to discuss with you the events last night that occurred at 30 East Liberty Street. At approximately 21:48 hours, one of our officers, Officer Anthony White, along with probationary police officer Philip Van Cleve, were traveling southbound on Moore Street in a marked cruiser. The officers heard a car horn honking and people yelling frantically from the Shell gas station at 30 East Liberty. As the officers pulled on the lot, they were flagged down by several individuals claiming that a woman was being actively robbed at the ATM while seated in her vehicle. The officers observed the vehicle. They could see a subject leaning into the driver's side window of the vehicle, assaulting the female who was in the driver's seat. As the officers approached, they began giving verbal commands congruent with their training. The subject, now identified as James Carney III, ignored the orders of the officers and continued to assault the female driver as he attempted to gain control of cash that she had just withdrawn from the ATM machine. What's the next slide? As you see here is a picture of the vehicle. You'll also readily notice that extremely close quarters between the driver's side of the vehicle and the actual physical structure of the ATM machine. Officer White approached Mr. Carney from the front of the vehicle and warned of his intent, verbally warned of his intent to deploy the taser if Mr. Carney did not cease and desist with his behavior. Mr. Carney continued to assault the female driver and was subsequently tased by Officer White. The taser failed to take effect, and Officer White cycled the taser a second time, but it apparently still failed to take the desired effect. Mr. Carney became unresponsive while still halfway inside the driver's side window, trapping the female in the seat of her car. Officers were unable to remove Mr. Carney from the window due to the close proximity to the ATM machine. Several police officers arrived, and multiple officers were able to pick up the rear of the vehicle by the bumper and move it away from the ATM so that Mr. Carney could be pulled from the vehicle window. At which time officers immediately began giving life-saving measures, including CPR to Mr. Carney, until the medics arrived from Cincinnati Fire. Mr. Carney was transported to UC Hospital, where he was pronounced deceased a short time later. Now, Mike John, if you want to come up, and we'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Was Mr. Carney, when he was tased, was he inside the car, or was he outside and fell into the car?
He was leaning inside of the vehicle, actively assaulting the victim here, who was biting, punching her. He had his arms around her neck, so he's leaning inside that vehicle.
And he was tased and then cycled again, and he never put his head out of the window.
Correct.
When you say that it did not take effect, can you elaborate on what you mean by what the desired effect would have been and what happened?
Well, normally speaking, when a taser takes effect, it basically affects the large muscles of the body, and you generally tense up. In this particular instant, it wasn't having that effect. The officers observed that it just was not effective as it normally is in training circumstances.
What does that speak to? If it didn't take effect, what's the theory?
Well, there's a couple of things that could have happened. The deployment of the taser darts, if the darts don't penetrate the skin and complete a circuit, then that can affect the taser in terms of how debilitating it is. Sometimes the barbs will get caught on clothing. This particular incident, I think the barbs entered his left arm and lower back area. So we're not quite sure specifically why it is. If we have any problems with tasers, we normally send them back to the training unit for review.
Is the thought that the taser, and how will you know this, did the taser kill this man, or would it be something else as a result of what you're describing now?
Well, that's probably going to come out in the coroner's report as the actual cause of death.
Yeah, we're currently awaiting the autopsy report from Dr. Samarco, which will give us more clarity on the exact cause of death. We do recognize that the taser is an intermediate weapon designed to prevent the use of deadly force. In this case here, the officers were faced with several exigencies in this response in trying to make this situation safe, protect this female who was actively being robbed. They had no idea whether or not the individual possessed a weapon. All they know is that the individual did refuse commands to cease and come out of the vehicle.
How closely would you say the officers followed your taser policy as of the 2012 changes?
It believes that the policy, we think right now the policy was followed. We think the officers acted reasonably and acted according to their training and with leadership and direction.
When you say it was recycled, does this mean that the barbs remain in the suspect and you just power it up again so that they get an additional charge? Is that what the recycling is?
That is correct. When you cycle the taser, it automatically cycles for 5 seconds. If you hit that trigger again, it will cycle for another 5 seconds unless you physically switch it off.
What make and model was used, a taser was used last night by the officer?
It's the newer model that we just
The
upgraded.
X26P?
Yes.
It's the newer one we just upgraded. X26 or X2? I'm not sure what the numbers are, but whatever the most recent.
I believe it's the
purchase that we did.
X26P.
Does that have a camera, Chief? Like that?
No.
After he was tased the first time, was he still assaulting her, or had he stopped assaulting her at that point?
I don't know how quick the succession of the taser deployments were, but the officers' observations were that he was still non-compliant with their verbal orders. They followed all the directives. They gave a verbal warning of their intent to use that taser. He was still not responding to any verbal direction to cease his assaultive behavior, and that's why they deployed it, just how they're trained to do so.
How long was the interaction from the time officers arrived and tried to get this guy to submit to the actual taser deployment?
I'd be speculating here, but I mean very, very quickly. It probably within a matter of 90 seconds, 2 minutes probably maximum.
Did he ever attempt to get out of that vehicle? Or, I mean, it wasn't that he was just stuck and he couldn't respond. You're saying he'd never stopped assaulting the woman?
That is correct, yeah. There was no indication he stopped assaulting her. She was screaming for help. And like I said, he was not responding to any verbal directives to cease assaulting her.
Was this captured on tape?
No, we don't believe it was. We're still, Captain Thigi and her personnel are still actively looking for any video that may be in the area. We do know that we don't have any recorded video from the shell lot or the ATM machine, unfortunately.
How often are tasers checked for functionality? Is it before each shift? And can you tell us how that process works?
Every single day. Every single day before the shift, as the officers fall in, they have a uniform inspection, a weapons inspection, and a taser test. So basically the taser cartridges are removed, the officer will cycle that taser for 1 full cycle. It's inspected by a supervisor every single day.
And this was done prior to the shift
Yes.
last night?
Does that testing tell how much electrical output was coming out and whether it will function, or just that it's functioning right now in terms of turning on?
I don't know what's recorded from the chip. There's a microchip inside each of the tasers, so you can download and get feedback that way. I don't know if there's any visual indication from any LED display on the taser itself.
With so much news about body cams for officers, and we've talked about that ad nauseum, Chief Blackwell, what about taser cams? I know they make the additional add-on accessory. Is that a consideration?
You know, it is. Let me get back over here for a minute. It is a consideration. However, for the very reason that we are moving very slowly in the body camera process, leads us to think that taser cams, body cams, dash cams, all of those cameras require storage and retrievability and cost. So we're looking at, certainly right now, we're looking at our body camera platform. We hope to have that up and running in the next several months. We have done the heavy lifting with the evaluation process, and so we'll be sending that out for RFP shortly. But Taser Cam, in addition to body cam, it may be a good thing to do, but we need to look a little further at how we manage a program with that much video being captured and stored. That's a lot of terabytes of video, which drives the cost very high.
What is the background of this suspect, and what would you like to say about this officer?
We believe now, today, first you're here within about 12 hours of the incident because Cincinnati Police believes in transparency and truth-telling. And that being said, we believe that the officers conducted themselves in accordance with the training and the rules and policies of the department. They acted bravely in this situation. We do know that the individual who is deceased has a criminal background. We purposely chose not to... Do you have his picture? Did you put his picture? We purposely chose not to put up his criminal history because we don't want there to be any impression that we're trying to further justify anything. We think our actions were above board and professional and absolutely necessary. But we do know that the individual that you see here, Mr. Carney, does have a pretty extensive criminal background that will be made available to you if you make the appropriate public records request.
I apologize if you've already answered this question, but do you have every indication that the initial taser, that he was tased? Did the taser work when the barbs hit him the first time before it was recycled? Is there any way to tell if he was tased and just was unaffected by the tasing, or if the taser didn't work?
Well, we believe that the action didn't stop. And that's what we want. That's what the officers need to happen. They need the aggressive action that precipitated or necessitated the use of the taser to stop. And according to the officers, that did not happen, which required them to cycle the taser a second time, which is not uncharacteristic. Yes, ma'am.
You know for sure, I think what you're asking is, did it make contact? And if so, will that be something we'll have to wait for the coroner's office to determine?
We will. We will have to wait from the coroner.
You said at this point you think the barbs hit the arm and part of the back. I know the articles that have come out about concern is that the barbs would be in such a position to where the electricity would somehow get to the heart. Were those barbs anywhere near the heart?
Well, we definitely don't want to tase people in the heart area, which is obviously the front of the chest. The back of the arm, the back of the thigh, the lower part of the back is where we train our officers.
And in this case, when there's protecting a life, your officers are well within their guidelines to tase the chest. I'm just trying to find out whether those barbs did come near the chest.
We don't believe it.
Whether the taser had any role.
At this point, we don't believe that the barbs came near the chest.
Is there a thought, Chief, that this Mr. Carney could have been on some kind of a drug that would have elevated his adrenaline level to withstand the taser barbs?
His erratic behavior would suggest that there may be some type of narcotic that was involved. We're not sure. Dr. Samarco will be able to give us that when she completes her forensic analysis of him. And so we're anxiously awaiting that report.
Do you know whether that would have an effect on, like being tased? Would that prevent you from taking effect?
We do know that historically drug-induced delirium and excited responses from people who are under the influence of drugs have oftentimes made the tasers ineffective.
Are you satisfied, Chief, with the overall taser program utilized by CPD at this point?
Absolutely.
Some people I spoke with in the community today around the gas station said that this particular ATM machine kind of has a reputation for illicit activity, long lines at odd hours of the night, people withdrawing large amounts of cash. Do you understand this to be any, along with occasional robberies? They said, do you understand this ATM to be any kind of a trouble spot, a hot spot for robberies?
I'll let Captain John speak to repeat calls for service locations in District 1.
When we look at that particular gas station, that does show up on our repeat calls for service just about on a monthly basis. It's a landmark location in Over the Rhine. It's a location that often is used when people are trying to say specifically where there are. I'm near the Shell station, even if they're not actually on the property itself. Regarding that specific ATM, we're not inundated with robberies associated with that ATM. It's a very busy Shell station. There's a lot of both vehicular and pedestrian foot traffic there. So, we work with the management there. We try to assume the best practices we can, but it simply is just a very, very busy location, central to OTR. I mean, you can't really get much more centrally located than that.
Chief Blackwell, I'll ask a quick question. Let's talk about, and I know we mentioned use of force in the previous question, with regard to use of force incidents involving tasers. Over the past year, for example, have they been on the rise to your mind? And we don't hear a lot about these kinds of incidents where tasers are deployed because apparently they're successful. But talk about the trend lines along that front.
Well, what we've seen this year is that our actual use of tasers have decreased, and we will be able to provide that information to you should you need it. We think that we do a pretty good job of using intermediate force only when it's necessary. I like to say that officers should be forced to use force. And we think in this situation, that is what happened.
Will the taser be sent off for any particular kind of testing to understand how it was functioning or how much electrical output was there at the time?
Absolutely. We have physical control of the taser. It will be submitted for outside testing.
We have our tactical planning unit.
Does it have anything on it that shows how much output was used?
It has a microchip in it that will be downloaded, and that will give all of the pertinent data at the time of its use.
We're kind of getting into the weeds on tasers here, but
Yeah.
do all officers have tasers?
We do. We do. And we're currently buying new tasers. In fact, we just got the money appropriated to outfit our officers with the oldest tasers with the newer ones.
And I'm wondering, what's the mix to your knowledge? The X26P, that was the recent order, 300 plus or so. Is there a mix? When you say older,
it's about 50-50 right now. And so now we've just purchased the new ones for the other half of the relief, and they will be getting those new tasers very shortly.
Are you a fan of the X2? Because I'm become an expert on tape, you know how that goes. But it has the ability to do a display arc that might calm someone down. But I know we've gone with the X26P, which apparently does not have that capability. What are your thoughts on that thing?
Well, I'm not the person that ultimately decides those decisions. We have people that review the technology and make recommendations on what's best for our platform here. So I'm confident we have the taser that works the best for us.
Chief, you've been doing this long enough that you predate the taser days. How would you assess tasers? Sorry, I'm guilty there too. So how would you assess the taser in a general sense as a law enforcement tool?
We just had that conversation in my office. A bunch of people that have also been on the length of time like I have, that this young guy, my captain here, made it a point to say that he's significantly younger than us. However, we did have that conversation about if this was 1988 or 1990, what would one of us have done? Captain Thigi, Chief Isaac, and myself were talking about how we would have been forced to respond to this scenario absent the intermediate weapon that is available now in the taser. And it would have probably resulted in a lot more heavy-handed physical force being used, and possibly even the use of deadly force.
I think that's a really good question, because can you anecdotally even quantify how many incidents likely have resulted in a taser shot, which meant the person did not end up possibly dying from a gunshot?
You're absolutely right. It's not as empirical as we would like it to be. It's more anecdotal, as you suggested, but we do know that the taser, the intermediate weapon, the taser, does save lives.
Could the officers been within their rights to use a firearm in that scenario when someone is being attacked?
Well, there's a lot of variables and factors that go into that goes through an officer's mind, whether he or she can use deadly force, and that happens in a split second. Officers have to make those life or death calls very, very quickly. They fall back on their training instantly that enables them to do those acts and make those decisions appropriately. We're not sure that this would have risen to the level of deadly force. Obviously, when the investigation is completed, we will be able to make a a more concrete statement as to whether or not that would have occurred.
Do we have a sense of timing between the taser being utilized and when they were able to get an automatic defibrillator on the suspect? Just because of him being trapped with the car and them having to lift it, one would think it was a while before the paddles went on him.
We don't think it was a while. We think that the medics were there very quickly. Their station is close. The officers were able to extricate this individual very quickly once they were able to move the vehicle, which surprisingly enough, I haven't been asked a question about how police officers can lift a car up, but they did, to move it away from the ATM machine, and thus they were able to get him out, and she was able to slide out through the passenger side once the weight was off of her as well.
You began this news conference, Chief, by talking about the need for transparency, and it's been, I think, a hallmark of your administration. Considering what has happened of late in Cincinnati and elsewhere, for those who maybe don't understand all the nuances that we're hearing from you today, and just hear another person die as a result of some police interaction, that potentially could be another damaging hit for the department. How important is it to be out in front of that and try to get all the elements out on the table?
It's critically important. It's absolutely critical that we remain transparent, that we do the right things at the right time for the right reason, and that we candidly talk to you about those incidents and actions in short order. We're not hiding anything. This is what we know to have happened at the time. Now, obviously, we're only 12 hours away from the incident, but our officers have been up all night working this, and we felt it imperative to give you at least an overview of what we think happened last night on the Shell lot at 30 East Liberty. And we think that is critical to maintaining the appropriate relationships with the people of Cincinnati. We're going to tell you when we think we got it right, and we'll also say when we think we may have not gotten it right.
Is a woman in this case? Can you update us on her condition?
She's in the case. She was obviously very shaken up from this. It's a terrifying incident for her. She was visibly, you know, what can you say? Just very, very scared about the whole incident, distraught. But she's physically okay.
And I can tell you she's very appreciative that the officers took quick action to save her.
And Officer White post this, how is his state of mind? How does that come into play here?
Well, a question was asked about that officer. He is absolutely one of our best, one of our true finest officers, an absolute professional. He's a field training officer, and he's very upset, very upset. No officer wants to go to work and be involved in an incident like this where somebody loses their life. It's a tragedy, and I know that the department really, you know, sends its thoughts and prayers to the Carney family. But yeah, he's struggling with it. It's a tough incident yesterday.
Sorry to interrupt. Will the officer be placed on any kind of leave or anything? What's the protocol for this versus like that leaves a firearm?
Standard leave, which is seven days administrative leave. Yes.
Okay.
One last question from my colleague. Do the officers have every right to shoot given what was happening?
Well, I think we've addressed that. We're not sure. We haven't played it out that far on the use of deadly force continuum. So we will certainly look at that as the investigation progresses.
I have one last question. How often are officers trained on the use of tasers, and is there any part of the body that they're told, if you have to hit that spot, don't use the taser? Is there anything that's off limits? Can you run through that real quickly?
Well, certainly the face is off limits, except in the most obviously exigent circumstances. And we train yearly with the taser, and we review the working order of the taser in the roll call with the supervisors prior to every shift.
So tasing someone in the arm or the back would be acceptable?
Absolutely.
Upper body?